The EOTech EFLX was announced at SHOT Show 2022, but it's just finally starting to trickle into the market. This is EOTech's first pistol optic, and it's their first red dot. The EFLX is not a holographic sight, which I know a lot of people were really hoping for, but holographic technology can't be miniaturized the same way reflector red dots can be, so we're unlikely to see a holographic pistol optic in our lifetimes. Quote me on that. This is billed as the first ever EOTech red dot, which is in fact true. There was the old L3 EOTech MRDS, which was often seen mounted on the Elcan Spectre. Well, the MRDS was really a product of Insight Technologies, which was acquired by L3 Systems, who at the time still owned EOTech, so a tenuous connection to EOTech at best. Also, the MRDS was bad. Let's not talk about it again. The EFLX is not a holographic sight, so the only thing that makes it an EOTech product is the large window. It's definitely bigger than an RMR, and probably technically bigger than a Holosun 507 or a Loophole Delta Point Pro. Finding out exactly how big would require high school level math, and I couldn't manage better than a C average in any math class after 7th grade. The EFLX window is pretty tall and pretty wide, but it's also square, so it doesn't make the most use of its surface area. Pistol dots with a convex top make better use of their window size, because taller windows help you to keep track of the dot under recoil, since pistol recoil tends towards the vertical rather than the horizontal. The EFLX definitely feels bigger and more open than the Trijicon RMR, but the Trijicon SRO and even the Holosun 507 seem to be a little bit bigger where it counts. The EFLX mounts to the Delta Point Pro footprint, which is kind of an odd deprecated choice, but I believe it was done for two reasons. One of the reasons we'll get to later. The other one is for the top-load battery capability. It's not easy, perhaps even impossible, to cram a top-loading 2032 battery into an RMR footprint, but you can do it on a Delta Point Pro. The EFLX, unlike the Delta Point Pro, doesn't have the spring-loaded toolless battery tray, but it's still pretty easy to swap, and of course the battery life is long enough that you're not going to be doing it all the time anyway. Omitting the fancy battery tray also makes the EOTech EFLX, hereafter referred to as the EOFLEX, sit a little bit lower on the gun, as do the use of side buttons instead of that weird top-mounted button that the Delta Point Pro has. The EOFLEX is not the most technologically advanced red dot on the market. Unlike some of the Holosuns, it does not have a shake-awake feature. It does have an auto shutoff feature. The up and down arrows on the EFLX have a similar behavior to the full-size holographic weapon sights. Pressing either button will turn the EFLX on, but if you press the up button, it's turned on without auto shutoff enabled, so it just stays on forever. That constant on feature is definitely welcome, and the battery life is more than adequate, especially considering it has a top-load battery, so you don't have to take it off and lose your Zero to replace the battery. On the one hand, it's very welcome that the EFLX is thinner than a Delta Point Pro, which is one of the tallest optics on the market. The body of the Delta Point Pro is just fucking huge. It really makes it almost impossible to co-witness iron sights. The EFLX sits a little bit lower, and it's also not quite as long, so it's much easier to co-witness irons through. In theory, but it also doesn't necessarily fit the same cuts as the Delta Point Pro, despite the fact that it shares the same footprint. Most pistols that are direct milled for a Delta Point Pro or have an adapter plate for the Delta Point Pro should in theory fit the EFLX as long as they don't require special screws. So I was unable to mount the EFLX to a Shadow Systems MR920 because the MR920 comes with its own screws and its own little spacer plates in order to be compatible with the Delta Point Pro. They are very specifically sized for the Delta Point Pro. They don't work with the EFLX. The screws are too long and the spacer is too small. EOTech advertises the EOFLEX mounted onto a Walther PDP, so I could probably get a Delta Point Pro for my Walther PDP and try that. I'm honestly not that motivated to try it, and the co-witness sight height is probably different for the EOFLEX than it is for the RMR that I currently have on there. I did not want to buy extra parts and adapters to use the EOFLEX on a pistol, so instead I just ran it as a piggyback paired with the new EOTech Voodoo 1-10. It easily drops into a Delta Point Pro offset ring topper mount. EOTech brags about the very minimal tint and very minimal distortion that the EFLEX has, at least compared to a lot of pistol dots. There is still some distortion and a little bit of tint, but almost all pistol red dots have that, and the EFLEX is certainly not the worst offender. It is one of the clearest, easiest to look through red dots, at least that I've tried. The EFLEX is also night vision compatible, and it has very good night vision performance. Maybe because of that lack of tint or distortion or whatever, but it is extremely clear, significantly better than the RMR. Glass clarity and light transmission of the EFLEX is very similar to the Delta Point Pro. The biggest issue with the EFLEX under night vision is that it only has one night vision setting, but it's a very dim setting, which is pretty good. The night vision setting of the EFLX works just fine in extremely dim environments, and the lowest 2 daylight settings can be used in brighter nighttime environments without blooming too much. The lowest NV setting on the EFLX is also dimmer than the lowest NV setting on the RMR. So all in all, the EFLX's night vision performance is significantly better than an RMR, and it's about on par with a Delta Point Pro. I compared the EFLX against the non-night vision version of the Delta Point Pro. I think that's a bit of a misnomer though. You can definitely use the non-night vision version of the DPP under nods. The night vision version just has programmable night vision settings that can get quite a lot dimmer. So I think the EFLX is absolutely better than a Delta Point Pro. The much thinner body is very good, and the fact that it has real buttons on the side instead of that awful top-mounted button of the DPP is a godsend. The EFLX is a little bit strange because it's a red dot with no gimmicks at all. It's a very boring red dot, but I think that's a good thing. EOTech didn't try to pull a Trigicon and make something wacky like the MRO just as an excuse to enter the market. The EFLX is also fairly affordable, coming in at below $400 street price, even brand new at launch. That is really tempting, especially since new Holosuns are getting up there in price, sometimes as much as $500. The EFLX is comparable in price to a Delta Point Pro and a little bit cheaper than the night vision specialized version of the Delta Point Pro. It's also cheaper than an RMR, and it's way cheaper than an Acro. All that, and it's made in America. Well, assembled in America. And it looks suspiciously similar to the Chinese-made Bushnell RX S250. I'll let you draw your own conclusions, but I think I might have an idea of where they got this base design from. The EFLX definitely seems better made than the Bushnell RX S250, but in terms of layout, mount pattern, controls, and performance, it's extremely similar. So why does the EFLX even exist? Is it just contract bait? Are they just trying to score some military or law enforcement purchases to go on top of all the recently adopted SIG 320s? Probably. If I had a pistol languishing with a Delta Point Pro optics cut, this is the red dot I would go for. The RMR still has some of those Trigicon intangibles and a reputation for being completely fucking bulletproof. The EFLX does not have that, although I don't suspect it will be any less durable than almost every other red dot on the market, at least the ones that aren't allowed to infringe on Trigicon's weird patent for the shape of the letter U. The EFLX also makes for a great piggybacked red dot to go with a higher magnification scope, particularly if you're autistic like I am and you really like to make sure that your red dot and your scope brands match. Unfortunately, the brand of your mount probably isn't going to match because the best way to set this up is with a loopholed Mark AR mount and piggyback ring topper. Oh well. The EFLX is a bit of a surprise. There's nothing wrong with this red dot, it just sort of exists. It's slightly, incrementally better than the other options on this footprint, so if you already have a SIG 320 and you're just really dragging your feet on putting a Delta Point Pro on top, well, I have good news for you. For everybody who isn't the US military or in law enforcement, I don't think you need to run out and buy one of these, but they are still pretty nice. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like this channel, make sure you subscribe because it's YouTube and that's how YouTube works. And if you'd like to support me directly, there is a link in the video description to my Subscribestar page where you can get access to some bonus stuff and early videos and some Discord nonsense that nobody gives a fuck about. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and I will see you guys next time.